Airline security pushed black boys to the ground, and one call to dad froze everyone on the spot. But what happened to those boys before that call will make you question everything you thought you knew about progress in America. The white gate agent's voice cut through the boarding area like a slap. There's no way you people could afford first-class tickets. These boarding passes are fake and you're both under arrest. The words hit 12-year-old Jordan and his 10-year-old brother Tyler like a physical blow. Jordan's hands, clutching their legitimate boarding passes, began to shake. Tyler's eyes immediately filled with tears that he tried desperately to blink away. They stood frozen at gate 23, unable to process what was happening. And here's what we need to face head-on right now. Racial discrimination in 2025 isn't some relic we've conquered or overcome. It's alive and thriving at every level of society, in every space, including airports where black children with valid tickets get accused of crimes they haven't committed. And it's gotten worse than the civil rights era because back then, at least the racism was honest. Today it hides behind policies and procedures and words like suspicious while targeting black bodies with the same hatred our grandparents faced. The weapons have changed, but the war against black dignity continues. Jordan felt his stomach drop, but he wasn't surprised. Terrified, absolutely. But surprised? This was the third time this year someone had looked at him and his brother and assumed they were criminals. He was 12 years old and already exhausted from having to prove he had a right to exist in spaces that white people claimed as their own. The scene at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport's Gate 23 looked like injustice frozen in time. Jordan gripped the boarding passes so hard they crumpled in his sweating palms. Tyler pressed close to his big brother, trying to disappear, trying to understand why the nice black gate agent who just checked them had smiled and said have a great flight, but this white woman was calling them criminals. The gate area buzzed with travelers heading to their destinations. Families with excited children. Business travelers scrolling phones. College students with backpacks. And every single person within earshot had stopped to watch. The antagonist blocking their path to the jetway was Karen Mitchell, a white woman in her late 40s who'd worked as a gate agent for 15 years. She stood with her arms crossed, her face twisted with suspicion and something that looked like satisfaction. Behind her, 2 airport security officers were already approaching, called before she'd even confronted the boys. Behind the boys, other passengers lined up to board Flight 447 to Miami watched with phones out. A businessman started recording. A woman whispered to her husband. A teenager held up his camera, live streaming to social media. But not one person spoke up. Not one person said, "Wait, these are children, let's figure this out before calling security." Jordan found his voice, though it shook with confusion and fear. "Ma'am, we were just checked by the other gate agent. She scanned our passes and said everything was fine. We're supposed to board now." "That agent made a mistake," Karen said, her voice loud enough that everyone nearby could hear. "She let you through because you're all the same. You people protect each other. But I'm not going to let 2 kids with obviously stolen first-class tickets board this aircraft." The racial coding wasn't even subtle. "You people. You're all the same." The implication that the black gate agent had shown favoritism based on race, that black people are inherently dishonest and help each other commit crimes. Every word was designed to other these children, to mark them as threats, to justify what she was about to do to them. "Our dad bought these tickets," Tyler said, his small voice breaking. "We're going to see our grandpa. Please, we're not lying." "Sure he did," Karen said with mock sympathy. "And I'm sure your dad can afford first-class tickets. What does he do? Let me guess, he's a doctor? A lawyer? Or are you going to tell me he's a pilot?" The irony of that statement would become clear soon enough. But in that moment, Jordan opened his mouth to say exactly that, to tell her that their father was Captain James Mitchell, senior captain for this very airline. But Karen cut him off. "Save the lies for security," she snapped. "They're used to hearing stories from people like you." The security officers reached them now, 2 white men in their 30s with expressions that had already decided these boys were guilty. One of them, Officer Davidson, looked at the boys with the kind of suspicion reserved for criminals, not children on their way to visit their grandfather. "These the kids?" Davidson asked Karen. "Trying to board with fraudulent first-class tickets." Probably stole them or bought them from a scammer online. We didn't steal anything, Jordan said, his voice stronger now despite his fear. Our tickets are real. You can check. You can call. Our father booked them for us. If you believe no child should ever be accused of theft just for trying to board a plane with their legitimate tickets, keep watching. If you think racial profiling at airports ended decades ago, you need to see what happens in the next few minutes. And if you've ever been treated like a criminal because of the color of your skin, drop a comment below and tell us your story. We're reading every single one. Also tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now because this story is reaching people everywhere. This doesn't end the way you think it will. Hit that like button if you stand against injustice, and subscribe to this channel because we're exposing the incidents that airlines try to hide. What happens next will leave you speechless. But to understand how two innocent boys ended up being accused of theft at an airport gate, you need to know who Jordan and Tyler Mitchell really are. Because this nightmare didn't start with Karen's accusations. It started that morning in their home in Charlotte, North Carolina, with excitement about seeing their grandfather and dreams that would soon turn into trauma. Jordan Mitchell was 12 years old, a 7th grader at Lincoln Middle School, and the kind of responsible big brother every parent dreams of raising. He carried a 3.7 GPA, played saxophone in the school band, and had just been elected student council vice president. His teachers described him as mature, thoughtful, and protective of younger students. He'd been taught by his parents to be polite, to respect authority, to always do the right thing. He was a good kid who followed rules and believed that if you did everything right, you'd be treated fairly. Tyler, 10 years old and in 5th grade, was Jordan's shadow and best friend. Where Jordan was serious and organized, Tyler was curious and creative. He loved science, collected rocks and fossils, and dreamed of becoming a paleontologist. He built elaborate Lego structures and could talk for hours about dinosaurs. He still slept with his favorite stuffed triceratops named Rex that their grandfather had given him when he was 5. Tyler looked up to Jordan with absolute devotion, trusted his big brother to keep him safe, believed that as long as they were together, nothing bad could happen. The bond between the brothers went deeper than typical siblings. Their mother had passed away from complications during Tyler's birth, a tragedy that had shaped both their lives. Jordan remembered her, carried memories of her smile and her voice. Tyler only knew her through photos and stories. Their father, Captain James Mitchell, had raised them alone with help from their grandfather. He'd taught them about resilience, about dignity, about being twice as good to get half as far. He'd also taught them about their mother, keeping her memory alive through stories and traditions. Their grandfather, Robert Mitchell, was 72 years old and lived in Miami. He was a retired civil rights lawyer who'd worked alongside Thurgood Marshall in the 60s, who'd marched in Selma, who'd dedicated his life to fighting the very kind of discrimination his grandsons were about to experience. The boys hadn't seen Grandpa Robert in 6 months, their longest separation ever. They'd video called every week, but it wasn't the same as sitting on his porch while he told stories about the movement, about their mother, about history and hope and the long fight for justice. This trip meant everything to them. A whole week with Grandpa Robert. A week of stories and laughter and the special bond between grandfather and grandsons. Jordan had packed his saxophone to play for Grandpa. Tyler had carefully wrapped the fossil he'd found on their last family camping trip as a gift. That Friday morning, the Mitchell house had buzzed with excitement. Jordan made sure they had everything they needed, checking their bags 3 times like the responsible kid he was. Tyler bounced around talking nonstop about all the things they do with Grandpa. Their father had driven them to Charlotte Douglas International Airport, his pilot's uniform crisp and pressed because he had his own flight to Captain later that day. In the car, Captain James Mitchell had given them his usual travel speech. Stay together. Be aware of your surroundings. Call me if anything feels wrong. But he'd also said something that would echo in Jordan's mind later. Boys, the world isn't always going to see you the way I see you. Sometimes people are going to look at your skin before they see your character. When that happens, you stay calm. You stay dignified. You remember who you are. Jordan had nodded, understanding in theory but not really grasping what his father meant. Not yet. At the airport, their father had walked them all the way to security, pulling strings as a senior captain to escort them past certain checkpoints. He'd hug them both tight, told them to give Grandpa his love, reminded them he'd be checking on them throughout the day. Then he'd watch them go through security, staying until they were out of sight, a father's protective instinct warring with the need to let his sons grow independent. Check-in had been smooth. Their father had booked them first-class tickets, wanting his boys to be comfortable and well-supervised for the 2-hour flight. The woman at the ticket counter had smiled warmly, processed their tickets without question, wished them a wonderful trip. Security was routine. They'd removed their shoes and belts, sent their bags through the scanner, walked through the metal detector without any issues. At gate 23, they'd waited like any other passengers. Jordan helped Tyler with a math worksheet he'd brought along. Tyler showed Jordan a new dinosaur fact he'd learned. They'd shared a breakfast sandwich from a nearby cafe. Everything felt normal. The initial gate agent, a black woman named Patricia who'd been working for the airline for 20 years, had been lovely. She'd scanned their boarding passes, commented on how polite they were, asked if they were excited about their trip. When they told her about visiting their grandfather, she'd smiled and said he was lucky to have such good grandsons. She'd waved them toward the jetway, her final words have a great flight still hanging in the air. Then Karen Mitchell appeared. She wasn't supposed to be at gate 23. She'd been assigned to gate 19 but had seen the boys approaching the jetway and something about them had triggered her suspicion. 2 black boys. First-class tickets. No adult supervision. In Karen's mind, shaped by years of implicit bias and racial stereotypes, this combination didn't compute. So she'd abandoned her post and rushed over to intervene. Her first words to them had been pleasant enough, professional even. "Can I see your boarding passes, please?" Jordan had handed them over without concern. They'd just been checked. Everything was fine. But then Karen's expression had changed as she looked at the first-class designation. Her eyes had narrowed. Her mouth had pressed into a thin line. And when she looked back at the boys, there was something cold and suspicious in her gaze that made Jordan's stomach tighten with the first whisper of unease. "These are first-class tickets," she'd said, and the way she said it made it sound like an accusation. "Yes, ma'am," Jordan had replied politely. "Our dad bought them for us." "Your dad?" Karen had repeated, and there was disbelief dripping from every syllable. That's when Karen had called security. That's when everything had gone from uncomfortable to nightmarish. That's when these 2 good boys, honor students, polite and respectful kids on their way to visit their grandfather, had been marked as criminals. And that's when the crowd of bystanders had started to gather, phones out, ready to witness but not willing to protect. Officer Davidson took the boarding passes from Jordan's trembling hands and examined them with exaggerated suspicion, holding them up to the light like he was inspecting counterfeit money. His partner, Officer Reynolds, positioned himself to block any escape route, as if these children might suddenly bolt like criminals fleeing a crime scene. "These look fake to me," Davidson said, though anyone with basic airline knowledge could see the passes were legitimate, properly printed with valid barcodes and flight information. "They're not fake," Jordan insisted, his voice shaking but firm. "The other gate agent just scanned them. They went through. Everything was fine until she stopped us." He pointed at Karen, who stood with her arms crossed, satisfaction evident on her face. "That agent made a mistake," Karen said loudly enough for the growing crowd of onlookers to hear. "She let them through because of you people nepotism." She saw 2 black kids with expensive tickets and instead of doing her job and questioning it, she just waved them through because they're black and she's black. That's how you people operate. The phrase "you people" landed like a slur. The racial coding was blatant, the implication clear. Karen was suggesting that black people were inherently dishonest and protected each other in criminal activity. She was suggesting that Patricia, a 20-year veteran gate agent with an impeccable record, had abandoned her professional duties because of racial solidarity. This is what modern racism looks like in institutional settings. It's not always burning crosses or explicit slurs, though those still exist. It's this kind of accusation that questions the competence and integrity of black professionals while simultaneously criminalizing black children. It's the assumption that black excellence must be fraudulent because in racist minds, black people achieving first-class status doesn't compute with their stereotypes. That's not true, Tyler said, his small voice breaking with confusion and hurt. She checked our tickets properly. She scanned them. The computer said they were okay. The computer can be fooled, Karen said dismissively. Scammers are getting more sophisticated. You probably bought these off some website that makes fake boarding passes. Happens all the time with people trying to fly above their station. Above their station. The phrase hung in the air like a relic from Jim Crow, a reminder that in Karen's worldview, there were places black people belonged and places they didn't. First class was clearly a space she believed these boys had no right to occupy. Our father bought these tickets legally, Jordan said, his patience fraying, his fear morphing into frustration. You can call the airline. You can check the reservation. Our last name is Mitchell. Our father is James Mitchell. He booked these tickets 4 days ago. Sure he did, Davidson said with that patronizing tone police officers use when they've already decided someone is lying. And what does this James Mitchell do for a living? Jordan opened his mouth to say it, to tell them that their father was Captain James Mitchell, that he'd been flying for this airline for 15 years, that he was a senior captain, one of the most respected pilots in the fleet. But Karen cut him off before he could get the words out. Let me guess, she said mockingly. He's a lawyer? A doctor? Or are you going to tell us some fantasy about him being a pilot or an executive? You know we can check these things, right? We can verify your lies. It's not a lie, Tyler said, tears streaming down his face now. Our daddy is a pilot. He flies planes. Big planes. He bought us these tickets so we could visit Grandpa in first class because he wanted us to be comfortable. How convenient, Karen said. A pilot father who just happens to work for this airline. Do you know how many people try that excuse? It's not an excuse, Jordan said, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. It's the truth. Call him. Please, just call him. He'll confirm everything. We're not calling anyone until we sort this out at the security office, Davidson said. He grabbed Jordan's arm, his grip unnecessarily tight. You boys are coming with us. Around them, at least 50 passengers had stopped to watch. Phones were everywhere, recording from multiple angles. A businessman in a suit looked uncomfortable but said nothing. A white woman with 2 children whispered to her husband but didn't intervene. A group of college students filmed while providing running commentary for their social media followers but made no move to help. This is the bystander effect in action, amplified by racial bias. Studies show that people are significantly less likely to intervene when they perceive victims as different from themselves, especially when those victims are black. The psychological distance created by race allows witnesses to rationalize their inaction. They tell themselves it's not their business, that surely the authorities know what they're doing, that getting involved might make things worse. But the truth is simpler and uglier. They don't see these black boys as worthy of the same protection they'd offer white children. Please don't touch us, Jordan said as Davidson's grip tightened. We haven't done anything wrong. Just let us board our flight. Our grandfather is waiting for us. Your grandfather can wait, Reynolds said, moving to grab Tyler. You're both coming with us to answer some questions about these fraudulent tickets. They're not fraudulent, Jordan shouted, his composure finally cracking. Why won't you believe us? Why won't anyone help us? That last question hung in the air, directed at the crowd of witnesses who stood silent with their cameras rolling. A few people looked away, guilt flickering across their faces. But still, nobody moved to intervene. An older black man finally stepped forward from the crowd. His voice was firm but respectful. Officers, I've been standing here watching this whole thing. These boys have been nothing but polite. They've explained their situation. Maybe you should verify their story before escalating this. Sir, step back, Davidson said sharply. This doesn't concern you. Those are children being accused of a crime, the man said. That concerns all of us. Step back now or you'll be detained too, Reynolds threatened. The man hesitated, looked at Jordan and Tyler with anguish in his eyes, then slowly stepped back into the crowd. Another person who tried to help but ultimately chose his own safety over the boys' protection. Karen pulled out her radio. I need additional security at gate 23. We have 2 juveniles with suspected fraudulent documents refusing to cooperate. Possibly part of a larger scam operation. We're not refusing to cooperate, Jordan said desperately. We're trying to tell you the truth, but you won't listen. The truth is you're trying to board a flight with fake tickets, Karen said coldly. The truth is you're criminals. And the truth is you're about to learn what happens when people like you try to take what doesn't belong to them. People like you. There it was again. The dehumanization. The reduction of two children to a stereotype, to a threat, to something less than human that could be treated with cruelty without consequence. Tyler was sobbing openly now, his small body shaking with fear and confusion. Jordan, I want to go home. I want Daddy. Please, I just want Daddy. Jordan pulled his brother close, trying to shield him, trying to be strong even though his own tears were threatening to fall. Oh, I know. It's going to be okay. Daddy will fix this. But Jordan didn't know if that was true. Their father was at a conference in downtown Atlanta, probably in a meeting right now with his phone on silent. He had no idea his sons were being accused of crimes, being manhandled by security, being treated like criminals at the very airline where he'd dedicated 15 years of his life. 2 more security officers arrived, responding to Karen's call for backup. Now there were 4 armed officers surrounding 2 terrified children. The optics were grotesque. The imbalance of power was obscene. We're going to need you both to come with us, the new officer said. If you resist, we'll have to use restraints. Restraints. Handcuffs. On a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old whose only crime was being black while holding first-class boarding passes. We're not resisting, Jordan said, his voice barely above a whisper now. We just want to see our grandfather. Please. We're telling the truth. But the truth didn't matter. Evidence didn't matter. Their father's position didn't matter because nobody knew about it yet. All that mattered in this moment was the color of their skin and the assumptions that color triggered in the minds of people who'd been taught, consciously or unconsciously, to see black children as threats. The officers moved to escort them away from the gate, away from their flight, away from their grandfather and the trip they'd been so excited about that morning. And as they were led through the terminal like criminals, Jordan made a decision. He wasn't going to let them take Tyler without a fight. Not a physical fight, because he knew that would only make things worse. But a verbal one. A stand for dignity and truth even in the face of overwhelming injustice. Our father is Captain James Mitchell, Jordan said loudly as they walked, making sure everyone could hear. He's a senior captain for this airline. He bought these tickets legally. And when he finds out what you've done to us, every single one of you is going to regret it. Karen laughed. Keep telling yourself that, kid. Keep living in your fantasy world. But it wasn't a fantasy. And in less than an hour, when that fantasy became reality, when Captain James Mitchell descended on this airport like a storm, Karen's laughter would turn to something very different. For now though, Jordan and Tyler were powerless. They were children trapped in a system designed to see them as criminals. And all they could do was endure and hope that somehow, their father would find out what was happening and come save them. Because that's what dads do. They save their children from monsters. Even when those monsters wear uniforms and badges and believe they're just doing their jobs. The security office was a small, windowless room in a restricted area of the terminal. Cold fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A metal table bolted to the floor. For chairs. Cameras in every corner. It felt like an interrogation room because that's exactly what it was. Jordan and Tyler sat on one side of the table, their hands shaking, their eyes red from crying. Across from them sat Officer Davidson and Karen Mitchell. Officer Reynolds stood by the door like a guard, as if these children might somehow overpower 3 adults and escape. Let's go through this again, Davidson said, pulling out a notepad. Where did you really get these boarding passes? Our father bought them, Jordan said for what felt like the 100th time. Captain James Mitchell. He works for this airline. He's a pilot. A senior captain. Davidson wrote something down, but his expression showed he didn't believe a word. And you expect me to believe that a pilot, a captain no less, has 2 kids flying alone in first class? Why wouldn't he fly with you? Why wouldn't he use his employee benefits to upgrade you properly? He's working today, Tyler said, his voice small and scared. He had to go to a conference. That's why we're flying alone. He wanted us to be comfortable, so he bought us first-class tickets. A conference? Karen repeated with exaggerated skepticism. How convenient. And this grandfather you're supposedly visiting, what's his name? Robert Mitchell, Jordan said. He lives in Miami. He's our dad's father. He's expecting us. You can call him too. Please, just call someone who can verify what we're saying. We'll verify things in our own time, Davidson said. Right now, I want to know how 2 kids from, where did you say you're from? Charlotte, Jordan answered. How 2 kids from Charlotte can afford first-class tickets to Miami? Those tickets cost what, $800 each? That's $1,600. Where would kids your age get that kind of money? This is the crux of racial profiling in economic spaces. The assumption that black people, especially black children, couldn't possibly have legitimate access to wealth or first-class accommodations. The immediate jump to criminality rather than considering the obvious explanation that their family could afford it. White children in first class are seen as fortunate. Black children in first class are seen as suspicious. We didn't get the money, Jordan said, frustration bleeding into his voice. We didn't buy the tickets. Our father bought them. We already told you this. So you say, Karen interjected. But here's what I think. I think you found these boarding passes somewhere. Maybe you went through someone's trash. Maybe you bought them online from a scammer. Maybe you stole them from someone's printer. And now you're trying to use them to fly first class when you know you have no business being there. No business being there. The words stung like a slap. The implication was clear. First class was for people like Karen, not for people like Jordan and Tyler. Their blackness disqualified them from premium spaces regardless of their father's legitimate purchase. That's not true, Tyler sobbed. Why won't you believe us? Why are you being so mean? We're not being mean, sweetheart, Karen said with false sweetness. We're doing our jobs. We're protecting this airline from fraud. You should thank us. Thank them. For accusing innocent children of crimes. For humiliating them. For treating them like criminals. The audacity was breathtaking. Davidson leaned forward, using his size to intimidate. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to run these boarding passes through our system. We're going to verify whether they're legitimate or not. And if they're fake, which I'm pretty sure they are, you're both going to be charged with attempted fraud and theft of services. Do you understand how serious that is? Do you understand that goes on your permanent record? Jordan felt his world tilting. Permanent record. Criminal charges. For trying to visit their grandfather with tickets their father had legally purchased. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. I want to call my dad, Jordan said. Please, just let me call him. He'll explain everything. You can call him after we verify your story, Davidson said. If your story checks out, you'll get to make that call. If it doesn't, your next call will be to a parent or guardian from juvenile detention. The threat was designed to terrify, and it worked. Tyler was hyperventilating now, his breathing rapid and shallow. Jordan put his arm around his little brother, trying to calm him even though his own panic was rising. Breathe, just breathe. It's going to be okay. But Tyler couldn't breathe properly. His chest heaved. His face was turning red. He was having a panic attack, his 10-year-old mind unable to process the trauma of being treated like a criminal. He needs help, Jordan said urgently. He can't breathe right. Please, he needs help. He's fine, Karen said dismissively. He's just being dramatic. He's not being dramatic, Jordan shouted. He's having a panic attack. He needs his inhaler. It's in his backpack. Where's his backpack? Reynolds asked. On the plane, Jordan said desperately. We already checked in. Our bags are on the aircraft. Please, you have to get his inhaler. The officers exchanged glances. Getting bags off an aircraft that was preparing for departure was complicated. It would require coordination with ground crew, would delay the flight, would be a whole production. Now, if this video has been interesting to you, then keep watching because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. But it will also break your heart at how long it took for that justice to arrive. And if you've been watching but haven't subscribed yet, you need to ask yourself why. Is it because you don't think these stories matter? Is it because you're comfortable with injustice as long as it doesn't affect you? Subscribe right now. Hit that button. Because if you won't stand up for children being brutalized by the system, if you won't even click a button to support channels exposing this injustice, then you're part of the problem. Don't be a bystander in the comment section like those passengers were in real life. Davidson finally radioed for assistance getting Tyler's backpack. But the process would take time they didn't have. Tyler's breathing was getting worse, his lips starting to turn slightly blue from lack of oxygen. "Please," Jordan begged. "Please help him." And in that moment, watching his little brother struggle to breathe while adults who should have been protecting them stood by with suspicion instead of compassion, Jordan understood something profound and terrible. This was what his father had tried to warn him about. This was what Grandpa Robert had lived through and fought against. This was the reality that no amount of respectability, no amount of good behavior, no amount of first-class tickets could shield them from. They were black. And to people like Karen and Officer Davidson, that made them guilty until proven innocent. That made them threats instead of children. That made their suffering something to dismiss rather than address. Tyler's panic attack was worsening. His small body shook. His eyes were wide with terror. And the adults in that room, the people with power and authority and the ability to help, were moving with the kind of casual slowness that suggested they didn't really believe this was an emergency. Because black children's pain has never been treated with the same urgency as white children's pain. Because black children have always been seen as more resilient, less vulnerable, less worthy of immediate intervention and protection. And Jordan, 12 years old and terrified, could do nothing but hold his brother and pray that help would come before it was too late. 15 minutes passed before an airline employee finally brought Tyler's backpack to the security office. 15 minutes of Tyler struggling to breathe while Jordan held him and begged for help. 15 minutes that felt like an eternity, that would leave psychological scars neither boy would easily shake. Jordan dug through the backpack with shaking hands, found Tyler's inhaler, and helped his brother take 2 puffs. Slowly, painfully slowly, Tyler's breathing began to normalize. His color started returning. But the damage was done. The trauma of suffocation combined with the terror of being treated like a criminal had pushed Tyler to a breaking point. The boy who'd been so excited that morning about seeing his grandfather now sat trembling and silent, his eyes vacant, retreated somewhere inside himself where the pain couldn't reach. "Can we please just go now?" Jordan said quietly. "Tyler needs to rest. He needs to see a doctor. Please just let us go." "We're not done here," Davidson said, completely unmoved by what he'd just witnessed. "We still need to verify these tickets." A knock on the door interrupted them. Another security officer entered and whispered something to Davidson. Jordan couldn't hear the words, but he saw Davidson's expression shift from smug certainty to confusion. "The boarding passes check out," Davidson said slowly, like he couldn't quite believe it. "They're legitimate. Purchased 4 days ago by a James Mitchell using an airline employee discount code." Relief flooded through Jordan so intensely his knees went weak. "See? We were telling the truth. We weren't lying. Can we go now? Can we catch our flight?" But Karen wasn't ready to admit defeat. Just because the tickets are real doesn't mean they didn't steal them. Someone could have stolen the employee's credentials. This happens all the time. We need to verify that James Mitchell actually authorized these purchases for these specific children. "You've got to be kidding me," Jordan said, his patience finally snapping. "You've terrorized us. You made my brother have a panic attack. The tickets are real. What more do you want?" "I want proof that you have permission to use them," Karen said stubbornly. "I want confirmation from this James Mitchell that he's actually your father and that he actually bought these tickets for you." "Then call him," Jordan practically shouted. "We've been asking you to call him for the past hour. Here, I'll give you his number." He pulled out his phone, the phone they'd let him keep since it wasn't considered dangerous. "Please just call him and end this." Davidson took the number but made no move to dial it. Instead he said, "We'll make that call in our own time. First, I want to verify some other details. Tell me more about this Captain James Mitchell. How long has he worked here?" 15 years, Jordan said. "He started as a first officer and worked his way up to senior captain. He flies international routes mostly. He has over 20,000 flight hours. He's won safety awards. He's one of the most respected pilots in the company." The more Jordan talked, the more uncomfortable Davidson looked. Because if all of this was true, if these boys really were the sons of a senior captain, then this situation had just become a career-ending disaster for everyone involved. But Karen still couldn't let it go. Her ego, her prejudice, her need to be right overrode any common sense. I still think something's off here, she insisted. These kids are too smooth with their story. It's rehearsed. They're probably professional scammers. Professional scammers, Jordan repeated in disbelief. I'm 12 years old. My brother is 10. We're honor students. We've never been in trouble. We just want to see our grandfather. Why is that so hard to believe? Because people like you don't fly first class, Karen said, finally saying out loud what she'd been implying all along. Because kids who look like you don't have fathers who are pilots. Because this whole situation doesn't fit with what I know to be true. What you know to be true is racist stereotypes, Jordan said, his voice shaking with anger and hurt. You looked at us and decided we were criminals before we even opened our mouths. You saw our skin color and that's all you needed to see. Don't you dare call me racist, Karen snapped, her face flushing red. I treat everyone equally. I'm just doing my job. Your job isn't to terrorize children, Jordan shot back. Your job isn't to ignore evidence. Your job isn't to almost kill my brother by denying him his inhaler. The room went silent. Even Davidson looked uncomfortable now. They'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. They'd treated these boys with a cruelty that was becoming harder to justify with each passing minute. I want to leave, Tyler said suddenly, his first words in 15 minutes. His voice was hollow, traumatized. I want to go home. I don't want to visit Grandpa anymore. I just want to go home where it's safe. And those words, coming from a 10-year-old boy who'd been so excited that morning, broke something in Jordan. His baby brother's spirit had been crushed. His innocence had been stolen. And the people responsible stood in this room acting like they'd done nothing wrong. We're going to call our father, Jordan said with a finality that surprised even himself. Right now. We're not waiting anymore. We're not answering more questions. We're calling our dad and he's going to come here and you're all going to wish you'd believed us from the start. He picked up his phone, but before he could dial, Davidson snatched it from his hands. You'll make calls when I say you can make calls, Davidson said. And that's when everything that had been building, all the fear and frustration and injustice, exploded into a physical confrontation that would change everything. Jordan lunged for his phone. Davidson pushed him back. Tyler, seeing his brother manhandled, jumped up to help. Reynolds grabbed Tyler. Karen stepped forward to assist. And in the chaos of adults putting their hands on children, in the tangle of arms and shouting and panic, the situation spiraled completely out of control. What happened in the next 60 seconds would leave one boy unconscious, would summon an ambulance, and would finally force someone to call Captain James Mitchell and tell him his sons needed him. But by then, the damage would be done. The confrontation in that small security office escalated in seconds. Jordan, desperate to call his father, reached for his phone in Davidson's hand. Davidson, interpreting the movement as aggression, shoved Jordan backward. The 12-year-old stumbled, his back hitting the metal table with a painful thud. Tyler screamed and ran toward his brother. Reynolds caught him, gripping the 10-year-old's arms tightly. Get your hands off him, Jordan shouted, scrambling to his feet despite the pain radiating through his back. Sit down, Davidson commanded, his hand moving to his belt where his restraints hung. Both of you sit down right now. We just want to call our dad, Jordan said, his voice breaking. Why won't you let us call our dad? Karen positioned herself near the door, blocking any escape. You boys need to calm down before this gets worse. Worse? Tyler sobbed. How can it get worse? You're hurting us. You won't believe us. You won't let us leave. This is what happens when systems prioritize control over compassion, when authority figures see black children as threats requiring domination rather than kids needing protection. Every escalation in this room was driven by adults who refused to de-escalate, who chose force over understanding, who valued their own egos over two children's well-being. I'm calling for backup, Reynolds said into his radio. We have 2 juveniles becoming physically aggressive in Security Office 3. We're not being aggressive, Jordan shouted. You grabbed my brother. You took my phone. You're the ones being aggressive. Sit down now or we will use force, Davidson said, advancing toward Jordan. No, Jordan said, standing his ground between Davidson and Tyler. Not until you let us call our father. Not until you stop treating us like criminals. That word, no, was apparently unacceptable. Davidson reached for Jordan's arm. Jordan pulled away. Davidson grabbed harder, his fingers digging into Jordan's bicep with bruising force. Tyler, seeing his brother being hurt, kicked at Reynolds' shin. The officer cursed and tightened his grip on Tyler, lifting the small boy partially off the ground. "Let him go," Jordan yelled, trying to pull free from Davidson to help his brother. That's when Davidson made the decision that would end his career. Frustrated by Jordan's resistance, angered by what he perceived as disrespect, he placed both hands on the 12-year-old's chest and shoved with significant force. Jordan flew backward, his feet leaving the ground. He crashed into Tyler, who Reynolds had just released. Both boys tumbled to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Jordan's head cracked against the metal table leg with a sickening sound that made even Karen gasp. Blood immediately began pooling on the floor beneath Jordan's head. Tyler, pinned under his brother's weight, screamed with a terror that cut through everything. "Jordan, Jordan, wake up. Please wake up." But Jordan wasn't moving. His eyes were closed. Blood matted his hair and spread across the cold tile floor in a growing crimson stain. "He's faking it," Davidson said, but his voice shook with uncertainty. "He's trying to make this look worse than it is." Reynolds knelt beside the boys, his training finally overriding his prejudice. "This isn't fake. He's really hurt. We need medical." Tyler managed to wriggle out from under his brother, his hands immediately going to Jordan's face. "Wake up," he begged, his small hands shaking Jordan's shoulders. "Please, Jordan. Please don't leave me." The door burst open. 2 more security officers and an airport paramedic rushed in, responding to Reynolds' frantic radio call. The paramedic took one look at the scene, the unconscious child, the blood, the terrified younger brother, and her professional demeanor shifted to urgent action. "Step back," she ordered, pushing Tyler gently aside. "How long has he been unconscious?" "Maybe 30 seconds, Reynolds said, his face pale. "What happened?" the paramedic demanded as she checked Jordan's pulse and breathing. "There was a struggle," Davidson started. "They pushed him," Tyler screamed. "He hit his head. They hurt my brother." His voice was raw with anguish and accusation. The paramedic's expression hardened as she understood what had happened here. She pulled out her radio. "I need an ambulance at the airport immediately. Male child, approximately 12 years old, head trauma, unconscious, significant bleeding. Possible concussion or worse." Around them, the security officers who'd been so confident in their authority minutes ago now looked terrified. They'd assaulted a child. They'd caused serious injury to a minor. And if that child's story was true, if he really was the son of a senior captain, their careers were over. But more than careers were at stake. Jordan lay motionless on that floor, blood still seeping from his head wound, his breathing shallow. Tyler knelt beside him sobbing, his small hands covered in his brother's blood, experiencing trauma that would require years of therapy to process. The paramedic worked quickly, applying pressure to the wound, checking vital signs, preparing Jordan for transport. "His pulse is steady but weak. Breathing is shallow. We need to move fast." An announcement echoed through the terminal. "Medical emergency, Security Office 3. Code Blue." People in the terminal stopped. Passengers looked up from their phones, and staff members rushed toward the security area. The situation that Karen and Davidson had tried to contain in private was now becoming very public. And Tyler, watching strangers work frantically to save his brother, pulled out his own phone with blood-stained fingers and did what Jordan had been trying to do all along. He called their father. The phone rang once, twice. Then Captain James Mitchell's voice, warm and concerned. "Tyler? What's wrong, buddy? Aren't you supposed to be on the plane?" "Daddy," Tyler sobbed, the word coming out broken and desperate. "Daddy, they hurt Jordan. He's bleeding. He won't wake up. Daddy, please come. Please help us." And in that moment, everything changed. The reckoning that Karen and Davidson had been avoiding for the past 2 hours was about to descend on them with the full force of a father's fury and a senior captain's authority. Captain James Mitchell was coming. And nothing would ever be the same. Captain James Mitchell was in the middle of a presentation at the Aviation Safety Conference in downtown Atlanta when his phone vibrated in his pocket. He normally silenced it during conferences, but with his sons traveling alone, he'd kept it on in case they needed him. The caller ID showed Tyler's number. His heart clenched with immediate concern. Tyler should be on the plane by now, halfway to Miami. He excused himself from the conference room and stepped into the hallway, pressing the phone to his ear. Tyler? What's wrong, buddy? Aren't you supposed to be on the plane? The sound that came through the phone made his blood run cold. His youngest son, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe, his voice shredded with terror and trauma. Daddy, Tyler choked out. Daddy, they hurt Jordan. He's bleeding. He won't wake up. Daddy, please come. Please help us. James felt the world tilt beneath his feet. What? Tyler, slow down. Who hurt Jordan? Where are you? At the airport, Tyler sobbed. Security. They said our tickets were fake. They wouldn't let us board. Jordan tried to call you, but they took his phone and they pushed him and he hit his head and there's so much blood, Daddy. So much blood. And he won't wake up. James's mind raced, trying to process information through the fog of panic. His sons had been detained by airport security, accused of having fake tickets. Tickets that he had personally booked using his employee credentials 4 days ago. And now Jordan was unconscious and bleeding. Tyler, listen to me, James said, forcing his voice to stay calm even though every instinct screamed at him to run, to fly, to get to his boys immediately. Are there paramedics with you? Yes, Tyler whispered. They're working on Jordan. They called an ambulance. Daddy, he's not moving. What if he doesn't wake up? What if I lose him like we lost Mommy? That question, that raw terror from his 10-year-old son who'd already lost his mother and now feared losing his brother, nearly broke James. You're not going to lose him, baby boy. Jordan is strong. The paramedics are going to take care of him. I need you to tell me exactly where you are. Security Office 3, Tyler said. They brought us here after the gate agent said our tickets were suspicious. They wouldn't believe us. They wouldn't call you. Jordan tried to tell them who you are, but they wouldn't listen. James's shock was morphing into a rage so profound it took every ounce of his military discipline to contain it. His sons had been racially profiled, detained, assaulted, and now one of them was being loaded into an ambulance while the other experienced trauma that would scar him forever. Tyler, I need you to put one of the security officers on the phone, James said, his voice dropping to a tone that made seasoned flight crew members step carefully. They don't want to talk to you, Tyler said. They're saying this is all Jordan's fault. They're saying he attacked them. There was rustling, then Tyler's small voice speaking to someone. My dad wants to talk to you. Then more rustling, and a male voice came on the line, cautious and defensive. This is Officer Davidson. Who am I speaking with? This is Captain James Mitchell, senior captain for this airline, James said, each word precise and sharp as a blade. And you have approximately 30 seconds to explain to me why my 12-year-old son is unconscious and bleeding while in your custody. The silence on the other end was deafening. James could practically hear Davidson's career flashing before his eyes. Sir, there was a situation. Your sons were attempting to board with what appeared to be suspicious tickets. Suspicious, James repeated, his voice deadly calm. The tickets I purchased 4 days ago using my employee credentials. The tickets for my sons to visit their grandfather. Those tickets appeared suspicious to you? We had reason to believe, Davidson started. You had reason to believe that 2 black children with first-class tickets must be criminals, James finished for him. You had reason to profile my sons based on the color of their skin. You had reason to ignore their explanations, refuse their request to call me, and escalate a non-situation into violence that left my child unconscious. Sir, it's not like that. Then tell me what it's like, Officer Davidson. Tell me how a routine boarding process turned into my son bleeding on your floor. More silence. Then Davidson's voice, smaller now. There was a misunderstanding that escalated. Your son reached for a phone and I perceived it as aggressive movement. My 12-year-old son reached for his phone to call his father and you assaulted him, James translated. Do you understand what you've done? Do you have any concept of the legal and professional consequences heading your way? Before Davidson could respond, James heard Tyler's voice in the background. The ambulance is here. They're taking Jordan. I want to go with him. Let my son go in that ambulance, James commanded. And you tell the paramedics I'm on my way. Tyler, baby, can you hear me? Tyler's voice came back on the phone. I'm here, buddy. You go with Jordan. Stay with your brother. I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 15 minutes. But James knew 15 minutes might be too long. He needed someone at that airport immediately, someone with authority to protect Tyler and ensure Jordan got proper care. He pulled out his work phone and dialed Captain Richard Torres, his closest friend and the current shift supervisor at Hartsfield-Jackson. Torres answered on the first ring. Mitchell, aren't you at that safety conference? Rich, I need you to do something for me right now, James said, moving toward the conference center exit at a run. My sons are at the airport. Security has assaulted Jordan. He's unconscious, being loaded into an ambulance. Tyler is with him. I need you to get to them immediately, and I need you to make sure everyone involved in this stays exactly where they are until I arrive. What? Torres's shock was evident. James, what the hell happened? Racial profiling, James said bitterly. My boys tried to board with the first-class tickets I bought them, and a gate agent decided they must be criminals. Security was called. It escalated. And now my 12-year-old has a head injury. I'm on it, Torres said, his voice hardening with anger. I'm in the terminal right now. I'll get to them. And James, nobody's going anywhere. I'll make sure of it. James burst out of the conference center and ran toward the parking garage where he'd left his car. His mind was already several steps ahead, already planning the consequences he would rain down on everyone involved. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. The airport security supervisor. Captain Mitchell, this is Supervisor Williams. I've just been informed of a situation involving your sons. I want to assure you we're investigating. Investigating, James repeated as he reached his car and threw himself into the driver's seat. My son is in an ambulance right now because your officers assaulted him. What exactly are you investigating? Whether he bled on purpose? Sir, I understand you're upset. Upset doesn't begin to cover what I am, James said, starting his car and peeling out of the parking garage. I want every officer involved in this incident suspended immediately. I want the gate agent who started this fired. I want security footage from every angle. And I want my son protected until I get there. Everything you're requesting is being handled, Williams said. It better be, James said. Because if anything else happens to my boys, if Tyler is treated with anything less than complete care and respect, I will own this airport. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Captain Mitchell, I'm truly sorry this happened. Sorry means nothing to me right now, James said. Results mean something. My son's safety means something. Everything else is just noise. He ended the call and focused on driving, weaving through Atlanta traffic with the kind of precision he usually reserved for threading a 777 through turbulent weather. His phone rang again. This time it was the hospital. Captain Mitchell? This is Grady Memorial. Your son Jordan has just arrived. His condition is stable but serious. We need your consent for treatment. You have it, James said immediately. Whatever he needs. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Sir, there's something you should know. There are security officers here insisting they need to question your son when he wakes up. They're saying he assaulted them. James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You tell those officers that if they go anywhere near my son, I will have them arrested for assault on a minor and harassment of a victim. My attorney is being contacted as we speak. Nobody questions my son without legal representation present. Understood, sir. And your younger son Tyler is asking for you. He's very frightened. Tell him Daddy's almost there, James said, his voice softening for a moment. Tell him Jordan's going to be okay and I'm coming for both of them. He made one more call. To the best civil rights attorney in Atlanta. A woman who'd handled cases against airlines before and won. She answered on the second ring, and James explained the situation in terse, efficient sentences. I'll meet you at the hospital, she said. Don't let anyone question those boys. Don't let security near them. And James? Document everything. every injury, every traumatic statement. We're going to make sure everyone involved in this pays. James pulled into the hospital parking lot 12 minutes after leaving the conference center. He didn't bother finding a proper space, just abandoned his car in front of the emergency entrance and ran inside. At the front desk, he gave his name and was immediately directed to a trauma bay. He pushed through the doors and saw Tyler first, sitting in a chair too big for him, his clothes stained with Jordan's blood, his face swollen from crying. The moment Tyler saw his father, he launched himself across the room. "Daddy," Tyler sobbed into James's chest as James caught him and held him tight. "I was so scared. I thought Jordan was going to die. I thought I was going to lose him." James dropped to his knees so he could hold his son properly, so Tyler could feel the solid reality of his father's presence. "I'm here now, baby. I've got you." "Where's Jordan?" "In there," Tyler pointed to a curtained area where medical staff moved with urgent efficiency. "They're doing tests. They said he has a concussion and he needed stitches." James kissed the top of Tyler's head, then stood with his son still in his arms. He pulled back the curtain and saw Jordan lying on a hospital bed, his head bandaged, his face pale, but his eyes open. When Jordan saw his father, tears spilled down his cheeks. "Dad," he whispered, "I tried to call you. I tried to tell them who you were. They wouldn't listen." James set Tyler down and moved to Jordan's bedside, taking his oldest son's hand. "I know," he said gently. "Tyler told me everything. And I promise you, everyone who did this to you is going to answer for it." Behind him, he heard familiar footsteps. Captain Torres entered, his face grim. "James, I've secured the scene at the airport. The gate agent and both security officers are in custody. Security footage has been preserved. And the airline's executive team has been notified. They're convening an emergency meeting." "Good," James said without turning around, his focus still on his sons. "Because this is far from over. This is just beginning." While Jordan was being treated at Grady Memorial Hospital, Captain Richard Torres stood in the airport security office where blood still stained the floor. Security footage played on multiple screens, showing every angle of what had happened to the Mitchell boys. The executive team had assembled: the airport director, the airline's regional vice president, the head of security, and the legal department. The footage was damning. It showed Jordan and Tyler being stopped at the gate. Showed Karen Mitchell's aggressive posture. Showed the boys being led away despite their polite protests. Showed the confrontation in the security office. And most critically, showed Officer Davidson shoving a 12-year-old child with enough force to send him crashing into a table. "This is a nightmare," the regional vice president said, his face pale. "These are Captain Mitchell's sons. One of our senior captains. And we let this happen." Karen Mitchell sat in a chair, no longer defiant, her face ashen as she watched her career evaporate. "I was just doing my job," she said weakly. "The tickets looked suspicious." "The tickets were legitimate," Torres said coldly, pulling up the reservation on his tablet. "Purchased by Captain Mitchell using his employee credentials. Verified by our system. Checked and approved by gate agent Patricia Harris. There was nothing suspicious about them except the skin color of the children carrying them." "That's not fair," Karen protested. "What's not fair is 2 children being terrorized because of racial profiling," the airport director said. "What's not fair is a 10-year-old watching his brother bleed because adults couldn't admit they made a mistake." Officer Davidson and Officer Reynolds sat in another area, both suspended pending investigation. Their union representative was already there, but even he looked disgusted by what the footage showed. They had used excessive force on minors. They had ignored protocol. They had escalated instead of de-escalated. Their careers in security were over. "Captain Mitchell is on his way here," Torres announced. "He left the hospital 20 minutes ago. His sons are stable. Jordan has a concussion and required 8 stitches. Tyler is traumatized but physically unharmed. And Captain Mitchell wants answers." The room went silent. Everyone understood what was coming. James Mitchell wasn't just an angry father. He was a senior captain with 15 years at the airline, with connections throughout the industry, with a spotless record and the respect of everyone who'd ever flown with him. And he was about to walk into this airport with righteous fury and legal representation. What's our exposure here? The legal counsel asked. Massive, Torres said bluntly. Assault on minors. Civil rights violations. Racial profiling. Emotional distress. We're looking at millions in damages, criminal charges for the officers, and a PR disaster that will make national news. Those boys' trauma is already going viral. Passengers filmed everything. It's all over social media. The security director spoke up. I want Davidson and Reynolds terminated immediately. And I want every officer in this airport retrained on de-escalation and bias recognition. Not just security, the VP said. I want that gate agent fired too. And anyone who witnessed this and didn't intervene, I want them disciplined. Torres pulled up another piece of footage. This shows multiple airline employees walking past that security office. Several heard the boys crying. None checked on them. None questioned what was happening. We have a systemic problem here. Then we fix it, the airport director said. Starting today. Complete overhaul of our protocols. Independent oversight. Zero tolerance for discrimination. That sounds good for press releases, Torres said sharply. But what about those boys? What about the fact that Jordan Mitchell will have physical scars and both of them will have psychological scars that might never heal? What about the fact that they were excited about seeing their grandfather this morning and instead they got assaulted by the people who were supposed to protect them? The room had no answer for that. A commotion at the door made everyone turn. Captain James Mitchell had arrived, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. He wore his pilot's uniform, every inch the senior captain, but his eyes burned with an anger that made seasoned executives step back. Behind him walked attorney Sandra Morrison, one of Atlanta's most feared civil rights lawyers. Behind her, 2 FBI agents. Because assault on an airport was federal jurisdiction. Captain Mitchell, the VP started, stepping forward with an extended hand. We're so sorry about what happened to your sons. We want you to know. James walked past the extended hand like it didn't exist. Where are they? Torres pointed to a side room where Davidson and Reynolds sat with their union rep. James headed straight for it. The FBI agents followed. Captain Mitchell, you can't, the security director started. Watch me, James said, pushing open the door. Davidson and Reynolds looked up as James entered, both men's faces showing fear they hadn't displayed when confronting 2 children. James stood in the doorway, 6 feet 2 inches of controlled fury in a pilot's uniform. Stand up, James said quietly. Both men stood, their training overriding their discomfort. I'm Captain James Mitchell. Those boys you assaulted are my sons. Jordan, who you shoved into a table, is 12 years old. He plays saxophone. He wants to be an aerospace engineer. Tyler, who you grabbed and terrified, is 10. He collects fossils. He still sleeps with a stuffed dinosaur. They are good kids. Honor students. Polite. Respectful. And you treated them like criminals because of the color of their skin. Sir, Davidson started. We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask, James said. You didn't verify. You didn't call me when they begged you to. You didn't de-escalate. You chose violence. Against children. My children. One of the FBI agents stepped forward. Captain Mitchell will take it from here. These men will face federal charges for assault on a minor in an airport facility. James nodded, then turned to leave. But he paused at the door and looked back at Davidson and Reynolds. You hurt my sons because you saw their skin color and made assumptions. You're about to learn what it feels like when assumptions destroy your life. When the system you trusted turns against you. When nobody believes your side of the story. Welcome to what Black people experience every day. He walked out, leaving the officers to absorb the weight of consequences finally catching up to prejudice. Outside, James found Karen Mitchell being escorted out by security, her ID badge and access removed. She saw him and opened her mouth to speak. Don't, James said simply. Just don't. Karen's mouth closed. She walked past him in silence, her 15-year career ending in disgrace. The airport director approached James carefully. Captain Mitchell, I want you to know we're implementing immediate changes. Everyone involved will face consequences. We're committed to making sure this never happens again. My sons still have trauma, James said. Your promises don't undo what they experienced. But I'll be watching. And if I hear about one more black child, one more black passenger, one more person being profiled and harassed in this airport, I won't just sue. I'll make it my life's mission to expose every single instance of racism in this system. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. James walked out of the security area, through the terminal where passengers stared and whispered, recognizing him from the viral videos. He walked with his head high, a father who'd come for his sons and brought justice with him. But as he drove back to the hospital where Jordan and Tyler waited, the victory felt hollow. Because justice after trauma is not the same as preventing trauma. And his boys would carry these scars long after the headlines faded and the lawsuits settled. The lawsuits were filed within 48 hours. Federal charges against officers Davidson and Reynolds for assault on minors and civil rights violations. Civil suits against the airport and airline for negligence, discrimination, and emotional distress. The cases were ironclad, supported by video evidence, witness testimony, and medical records documenting Jordan's injuries. Karen Mitchell was terminated immediately. Her personnel file revealed a pattern that investigators had missed or ignored. 17 complaints over 15 years, 14 of them from passengers of color. She'd been counseled, warned, sent to diversity training. But she'd never faced real consequences until she targeted the wrong children. Officer Davidson and Reynolds were fired and arrested. They faced federal prison time. Their union declined to fight their terminations once they reviewed the footage. Some actions, even union representatives agreed, were indefensible. 3 airline employees who'd walked past the security office and heard the boys crying were suspended without pay. They'd chosen convenience over compassion, silence over intervention. Their inaction had consequences too. The airline settled the civil suit for an undisclosed amount, reported by media sources to be in the 8-figure range. The airport implemented mandatory bias training for all staff, created an independent oversight committee for discrimination complaints, and established a direct hotline for passengers facing profiling. But policy changes and money couldn't undo what happened to Jordan and Tyler. Jordan's physical wounds healed within weeks. 8 stitches became a scar hidden by his hairline. The concussion resolved. But he developed anxiety that required therapy. Crowds made him nervous. Authority figures made him tense. He had nightmares about being trapped in that security office, about reaching for his phone and feeling hands shoving him backward. Tyler stopped talking about dinosaurs. The joy had drained from his interests. He became clingy, afraid to let his father or brother out of his sight. He wet the bed for 2 months after the incident, a regression trauma that broke James's heart every time he had to comfort his 10-year-old through the shame. They never made it to Grandpa Roberts that week. Their grandfather flew to Atlanta instead, held his grandsons, and cried with them over what they'd endured. The trip they'd been so excited about became a trauma they'd spend years recovering from. And every time they passed an airport, every time they saw a security uniform, the fear came flooding back. Justice had been served. But innocence, once stolen, can never be fully restored. 6 months after the incident, the Mitchell family sat in their living room for an interview with a civil rights documentary filmmaker. Jordan and Tyler had agreed to share their story, hoping it might protect other children from experiencing what they had endured. Jordan, now 13, spoke with a maturity that shouldn't have been forced upon him so young. I used to think that if you were polite and respectful, if you followed the rules and did everything right, you'd be treated fairly. That's what my dad taught us. But that day taught me something different. It taught me that to some people, my skin color matters more than my character. Tyler, still 10 but somehow older than his years, added quietly, I don't feel safe anymore. Even when we're just going to the store or to school, I'm always worried that someone's going to think we're doing something wrong just because we're black. James sat between his sons, his hand on each of their shoulders. This wasn't supposed to happen to them. I spent 15 years building a career, trying to create a world where my boys would be safe. And in 2 hours, that illusion was shattered. Money can't fix this. Policy changes can't undo their trauma. All we can do is move forward and fight to make sure other families don't go through this. The settlement money was placed in trust funds for the boys' education and therapy. Captain Mitchell continued flying but became an advocate for airline passenger rights and anti-discrimination training. He spoke at conferences, testified before Congress, used his platform to demand change. But late at night he still heard Tyler's nightmares. Still saw Jordan flinch when they passed through airports. Still carried the weight of not being there when his sons needed him most. Davidson and Reynolds served 18 months in federal prison. Karen Mitchell never worked in aviation again. The airline stock dropped briefly, recovered, and continued business as usual with new policies that looked good on paper but required constant vigilance to enforce. And if you've watched this entire story and felt anger, felt heartbreak, felt the injustice of what happened to Jordan and Tyler, but you haven't hit the like button or subscribed to this channel, you need to ask yourself why. Is it because you don't think these stories deserve amplification? Is it because you're comfortable watching injustice as entertainment but not supporting the platforms that expose it? If you believe these stories matter, if you believe black children deserve protection, then prove it. Subscribe. Because silence and inaction in the comments section is no different than the silence of those passengers who watched and did nothing. Don't be a bystander. Be part of the solution. The Mitchell boys never got their week with Grandpa Robert in Miami. But they got something else. They got their voices. They got their story heard. And they got the knowledge that sometimes, even when the world tries to break you, justice can still prevail. But it shouldn't take a father being a senior captain for that justice to come. It shouldn't require wealth and connections and viral videos for black children to be believed and protected. That's the real lesson here. Justice came for Jordan and Tyler Mitchell. But how many other black children suffer the same treatment and never get justice? How many families don't have the resources to fight back? How many incidents happen in airports and stores and schools every single day that never make the news, never get resolved, never result in accountability? This story had a resolution. Most don't. And that's the tragedy we still need to address.